Deep within the heart of the ancient village of Umidike, there lay a hospital nestled on the edge of a dense forest that seemed to stretch into eternity. The hospital had once been a place of healing, a sanctuary for the sick, established by wise healers who had served the village faithfully. But that was long ago, and those healers had since disappeared. Now, a strange group of nurses ran the hospital, women known only as the night nurses. They were unnaturally beautiful, with piercing eyes and voices that could enchant even the most guarded of hearts. Rumors spread across the village, claiming that these nurses were not ordinary healers. People whispered that they possessed dark powers and held a pact with ancient spirits that demanded sacrifices. But despite the whispers, desperate families still brought their daughters to the hospital when they fell ill, clinging to hope in the face of horror. The villagers noticed that every girl who returned bore a strange mark on her collarbone, an eye, or sometimes a small snake-like symbol. And these girls, once lively and full of spirit, became pale shadows of themselves, bound by silence and a blank stare that haunted their families. The tale begins with Kamsi, a bright and fearless 14-year-old girl known for her bravery and sharp wit. Her little sister, Edaora, was one of the most recent victims. One day, Edaora fell mysteriously ill. Her once cheerful laugh was replaced by a silent, haunting stare, and her skin grew cold as though touched by the spirit world. Kamsi's mother, desperate to save her daughter, took Edaora to the hospital despite the terrible rumors. The night nurses welcomed her with soft voices and cold smiles, and Edaora was taken behind the thick iron doors that only the nurses dared cross. Days passed, and when Edaora finally returned, Kamsi knew instantly that something was wrong. Her sister was distant and cold, her eyes empty. A strange symbol marked her collarbone, and she moved about like a puppet, responding only to the nurse's instructions. But Edaora was not the only girl affected. More and more young girls fell ill and returned from the hospital with the same distant stare and the same mark. Villagers began to notice other strange occurrences, ghostly lights flickering in the hospital windows at night, cries echoing through the air, and whispers in the wind. Mothers wept for their lost daughters, fearing they were cursed, bound to the hospital's dark rituals. Kamsi's grandmother, an elder in the village and a wise storyteller, sensed that something far darker lay behind these strange illnesses. She told Kamsi stories of ancient spirits, Chi-Aru, powerful entities that could trap a person's essence, feeding on it to sustain their own twisted life. Her grandmother explained that the night nurses had likely made a pact with these spirits, using the girl's vitality to preserve their own youth and beauty. "If you go there, child," her grandmother warned, pressing a small wooden amulet into Kamsi's hand, "you may not return. These nurses do not bleed as we do. They are bound to darkness, and they will stop at nothing to keep their power." But Kamsi's resolve was unbreakable. She couldn't let her sister or any of the other girls suffer such a fate. That night, armed with her grandmother's amulet and the courage of her ancestors, Kamsi slipped out of her home and made her way toward the hospital. The hospital loomed ahead, silent and foreboding, the moon casting long shadows across its cracked walls. Kamsi entered quietly, her heart pounding as she crept through the corridors. The dim hallways were lined with strange symbols and faint, ghostly lights that flickered like fireflies. She heard the soft, melodic chanting of the nurses echoing from a distant room, a sound both beautiful and terrible. At last, she reached a large iron door with symbols carved deeply into the frame. She peered through a small crack and saw a ritual in progress. The nurses were gathered in a circle, chanting in an ancient language, their hands clasped tightly. In the center of the circle was a large basin filled with a dark, viscous liquid, glowing with an eerie light. Above it hung a thread of hair, a dark, curly strand that Kamsi recognized instantly as her sister's. The nurses were performing a ritual of Dioku Ohu, an ancient rite to transfer the life force of the young girls into the basin. Their essences were captured and stored in small jars, each labeled with a girl's name. Kamsi's heart sank as she saw the jar labeled Edaora, glowing faintly as her sister's spirit was siphoned away. She realized that the nurses were stealing the souls of these young girls, feeding on their youth to prolong their own lives. Just then, Kamsi felt a cold hand on her shoulder. She turned, stifling a scream, to see one of the nurses staring at her with dark, hollow eyes. "You should not be here," the nurse whispered, her voice slithering into Kamsi's mind, filling her with dread. Kamsi tore away from the nurse's grasp and ran, her heart pounding as the nurses gave chase, their footsteps unnaturally fast and silent. She bolted down twisting hallways, searching for a way out, clutching the amulet her grandmother had given her. In her panic, she stumbled into a small room filled with ancient herbs and tattered books. One book lay open, its pages covered with symbols Kamsi did not recognize, but she sensed they held power. Desperate, she began to recite the words on the page, feeling an unfamiliar strength surge through her. The nurses burst into the room, their faces twisted in rage. But as Kamsi's voice grew stronger, the amulet began to glow, filling the room with a warm, golden light. The nurses shrieked, their true forms revealed, twisted, skeletal figures with hollow eyes and claws for hands. The power of the ancestors was with Kamsi, protecting her, pushing back the darkness. The light expanded, reaching the jars on the shelves, shattering them one by one and releasing the spirits trapped inside. Kamsi saw her sister's spirit among them, smiling at her before vanishing in a burst of light. The nurses' bodies began to disintegrate, their pact with the spirits broken, their power dissolved. Kamsi emerged from the hospital, carrying the spirits of the girls with her, their life force restored. As dawn broke, the girls awoke, freed from the curse that had bound them. The villagers, filled with relief and gratitude, surrounded Kamsi, praising her bravery and hailing her as a heroine. The elders, guided by Kamsi's grandmother, sealed the hospital doors and burned it to the ground, chanting ancient prayers to banish the spirits within. As the flames consumed the building, the villagers heard one final, piercing scream, the last echo of the nurses, defeated but never truly gone. To this day, the villagers of Umidek warn their children about the dangers that lurk in shadows. The burnt remains of the hospital stand as a monument to the courage of a young girl who faced the darkness and broke the curse that plagued her village. And on quiet nights, when the wind is still, some say you can still hear faint chanting carried from the ruins, a chilling reminder that some forces never truly fade. And so, the legend of the cursed hospital of Umidek lives on, passed down from generation to generation, a tale of bravery, sisterhood, and the power of light against the shadows. Thanks for watching. Kindly like, share and subscribe for more videos.